we begin the markup, that's what we're going to be starting on right away. We've already had an initial meeting at the Senate Armed Services Committee on the National Defense Authorization Act. I want to express my deep concern over the continued malign behavior by overtly hostile nation in North Korea. I often talk to people, and they shake their head in disbelief that we have a country out there that is run by a mentally deranged individual who is rapidly developing the capability of hitting mainland United States with a missile. And I just think it's so important that we immediately get into our defense authorization bill so we can start addressing this and many other problems that we have. It's important to us here in the Senate to communicate to the American people the incredibly grave situation that we are facing right now in North Korea. The Kim Jong-un regime has expressed a desire to destroy the United States of America. Now, normally that wouldn't be a concern because he wouldn't have that credibility. But right now, we're seeing progress being made in their technology and their ability to actually hit major areas. In April, North Korea's official newspaper relayed the threat of a preemptive strike, and I'm quoting now. They said, completely and immediately wipe out not only United States imperialist invasion forces from South Korea and its surrounding areas, but the United States mainland and reduce them to ashes. Now that's a threat that has come directly from the leader of North Korea. And these are just the most recent of a long line of threats by that individual. In addition, North Korean leaders constantly threaten our friends and allies in South Korea and Japan. These three threats are not just hollow words any longer. North Korea capabilities are rapidly improving to meet their long-stated intent. In his 6 years in power, and we thought that Kim Jong-il was bad, but in the 6 years that his son, Kim Jong-un, has conducted as many as 75 ballistic missile tests. In comparison, his father, over a 17-year period, conducted about 30. In other words, he's done over twice as many in just a fraction of the time. Additionally, Kim Jong-un has sped up the North Korea's nuclear program since taking power in 2011. And North Korea's nuclear technology is advancing at an alarming rate. For example, the bomb North Korea tested in its most recent test last September was 10 times more powerful than what the regime could have produced in 2006, 10 times more. And at the same time, North Korea has actively worked on miniaturizing the nuclear weapons so that they can deliver by way of a ballistic missile. Now, earlier this year, analysts detected activity at a North Korean nuclear test site indicating another nuclear test may be imminent. The intelligence and the military experts have repeatedly argued that it is prudent to assume that North Korea has successfully miniaturized their nuclear weapons. That means that the only technology they need to conduct a nuclear strike on the United States mainland, that's us, that's right here, would be a functional intercontinental ballistic missile or an ICBM. In January, Kim Jong-un said North Korea is, quote, in the final stages in this preparation. Well, let's make sure we understand what we're talking about here. We know that their capability is getting very close to it, and they've already said that they would send something over to mainland United States. Unfortunately, when you talk to people out in the real world, they just can't believe that this could be true. That one guy who's mentally deranged could be heading up a country that has the capability of blowing up an American city. And yet we know that this is going on right now. In a recently, actually it was in an Armed Services Committee, and I was in attendance at that time, the Defense Intelligence Agency Director, Lieutenant General Vincent Stewart, told the Armed Services Committee, and this is his quote, if left on its current trajectory, the North Korean regime will ultimately succeed in fielding a nuclear-armed missile capability of threatening the United States homeland, unquote. That is a direct quote. by the guy who knows more about this than anybody else does. General Stewart added, and it's still quoting, he said, "The North Korean regime is committed and is on the pathway where it is capable, and its capabilities are inevitable." So I'll just say that again. Our intelligence experts assess that unchecked North Korea will inevitably achieve its capability to strike United States homeland with a nuclear missile. Now, even without ICBM capability, the missiles that we know they already have can range United States, that means can reach the United States military personnel and other citizens in both South Korea, Japan, and Guam, and many other areas. North Korea's known missile inventory now includes a missile that North Korea successfully tested for the first time in May the 14th. That missile represented a major breakthrough in North Korean ballistic missile technology. The reports indicate the missile traveled over 1,300 miles at an altitude and successfully exited and then re-entered the Earth's atmosphere, a key requirement for nuclear-capable ICBMs. Now, if fired at its maximum range, the missile could have reached Guam. Though the missile itself was not an ICBM, the technological breakthrough demonstrates the significant advancement North Korea has made in their ballistic missile capability. I mean, this is actual. This is happening. This is today. This is reality. Another significant advancement that occurs to me is the solid fuel road mobile missiles the regime is developing. Kim Jong-un has successfully tested 2 such missiles already this year, one in February and another just last month on May the 21st. Solid fuel missiles mounted on mobile launch vehicles can be prepared ahead of time, so they can build up an inventory and come back and use that inventory whenever they desire to do so. So, what can we do? It's clear that North Korea does not respond to international pressure. All of these ballistic missile tests violate the multiple UN resolutions, and yet North Korea carries them out despite sanctions and international condemnation. So the normal type of negotiation doesn't work with those guys over there. Now, furthermore, conventional wisdom has led us to believe that China, North Korea's main trade partner in that region, holds significant sway over the regime. That conventional wisdom has been called to question recently, and I commend the Trump administration for recognizing this and for working with China on this issue. But we can't assume that China will be able to help us close a deal in a diplomatic way. Therefore, it's incumbent upon us to take all appropriate steps to defend ourselves from this growing threat that exists today. We got to keep in mind that as we formulate this year's National Defense Authorization Act, and that's what I'm talking about now, because we're going to have to do it. We've gone for 53 consecutive years, we have passed the Defense Authorization Bill. And right now there's some doubt as to whether or not we're going to get enough cooperation from those in this chamber to make that happen again. I can remember 4 years ago when I was the ranking member on the Senate Armed Services Committee, we didn't get this done until the latter part of December. Well, if you wait around to the latter part of December and it passes mid-year, we're going to have our kids, our soldiers over there, not getting what they need to be getting in the way of hazard pay, in the way of flight pay, and other things. It would be an absolute disaster. So right now, they're watching us. Our kids are over there watching us now to see what we're going to do with the most important bill that we pass every year. And so that's what we're going to get started. So anyway, I applaud the President for the fiscal year 18 budget request that calls for an increase in defense spending and aims to fill critical readiness gaps that we have right now, and we need to build off that baseline even further. First, we need to bolster our national ballistic missile defense capabilities to address the threat that we face from North Korea. That's a no-brainer. We all understand that. Since 2006, the Missile Defense Agency budget has fallen more than 23% when adjusted for inflation. Now, while we have taken positive steps in recent years, we need to ensure our last resort defenses are airtight. We should heed the recommendations of defense experts like General Laurie Robinson, commander of the United States Northern Command, who testified here in April to our committee, and I'm quoting her now. This is Laurie Robinson, as, quote, "As adversaries continue to pursue credible and advanced capabilities, we too must evolve our missile defense capabilities to outpace increasingly complex threats." And I think that's a recognition by her, the one who probably knows more about it than anyone else, that we're not keeping pace right now. So simultaneously, we got to bolster our military. Our forces are smaller than the days of the hollow force. I chaired a committee not too long ago of the vices of all four services. They all came in, and the conclusion was, even though some of them were not old enough to remember, as I remember, the 1980s when at the end of the Carter administration, but they came and they made the statement that they are we are in a situation now that we've never been in before, and that we are, in fact, a hollow force, just as hollow as we were back in 1989 after the Carter administration. Now, we really owe our brave servicemen and women better. We owe them the obligation. It's our obligation to let them know what we are doing. And our forces are smaller than the days of the hollow force, as I mentioned, in the 1980s. And our equipment is aging, and our base infrastructure requires critical maintenance and upgrades. We went through 8 years in the Obama administration. We paid our price. And what's happened, we're not really giving our brave young warriors the equipment that they need. So anyway, through this year's NDAA, we ought to prioritize across the board in-strength increases and additional investments in maintenance to fill gaps in existing formations and to get our existing equipment back to par. The first thing that happens when you're on a starvation diet is to let your maintenance and your modernization go. And we have done that. I hear people say that defense spending is out of control. The truth is that defense spending is a proportion of the total government spending has steadily decreased since World War II. How many people are aware that in 1965, we spent 52% of our total resources on defending America? Today, it's 15%. That's happened. No one seems to care about it because they don't know about it. But nonetheless, that is where we are today. In the recent years, despite waging multiple wars and facing unparalleled global threats, our spending has decreased to about 15% of our total spending. The Chief of Staff of the Army, General Milley, has said it best when it comes to funding our military. This is really significant. Now, when people talk about spending too much, he said, quote, "The only thing more expensive than deterrence is actually fighting a war. And the only thing that is more expensive than fighting a war is fighting one and losing one. We're expensive, we recognize that, but the bottom line is it's an investment that we have got to make." So we have got to immediately make up for the damage done by the years of the dangerous defense cuts and recognize what government's really supposed to be doing. I often refer to that old document that nobody reads anymore. It's called a Constitution. You read that and it tells us what we're supposed to be doing here. Number one, mainly two things. Number one, defending America. Number two, they called them post roads back then, but infrastructure. That's what we're actually supposed to be doing. So the good news is that under the leadership of President Trump, we have already started that process working. The appropriation bills last month stopped the decline in Army strength. So instead of the planned 460,000 active soldiers, we now have 475. We also added 1,000 Marines and a few hundred airmen. In total, we currently have 24,000 more service members than we would have had under the previous administration. Now, the more good news is that we have exceptional patriots like the airmen at Tinker, Vance, Altus, and all these Air Force bases, and those who are protecting the skies with F-16s out of my city of Tulsa. Soldiers like those at Fort Sill in Oklahoma, the 45th Infantry Brigade, who are right now in Ukraine training our allies. A lot of people don't know that the policy that we've followed are following under this new administration is that we are using our resources to help others train themselves. In the case of Ukraine, what happened to Ukraine should never have happened, because Ukraine, they had this great parliamentary election. I happened to be there at the time. It was about 4 years ago. And for the first time in 96 years, Ukraine doesn't have one communist in its parliament. Now, they did that because they love us, they love the West, and consequently, Putin came in right after that. This is back during the Obama administration, and he started killing the Ukrainians who were seeking their freedom, our best friends over there, and our administration refused to let us even send defensive weapons over there. Well, we're correcting that. In fact, the bill that we're talking about right now, the Defense Authorization Bill, is one where we're going to be addressing that problem. So I'm optimistic that we'll rise to the occasion and meet the challenge presented by the agnostic North Korean regime, and confident that President Trump is taking the appropriate steps to address this threat diplomatically. However, as we in Congress need to follow his lead to ensure that our men and women in uniform have the resources required to answer the call quickly and effectively. So, we don't have the luxury of time. You just think of the statement that I read a minute ago that where General Vincent Stewart told the Armed Services Committee just a week ago. He said, if left on its current trajectory, North Korea will succeed in fielding a nuclear-armed missile capable of threatening the United States of America. So while we have a lot of problems right now on this floor, and we're trying to address these problems, the number one problem is what's happening to our military and the absolute necessity of getting a defense authorization passed very rapidly, and we're starting it today. Is that the end? And that's good. Yeah.